interesting and insightful conversation. I think it's not very often that we get to have that historical view of the great progress that's been made since the formation of the LEP in 2010. If I think about the things that I really heard strongly in that conversation, I think the big word comes down to collaboration and how we work together, doesn't it? You know, there was a lot of discussion about clusters and about bringing people and bringing businesses together and the power that comes when we do that. And I think just earlier this year, for the first time, we brought together 60 people that were working in the health and care sector in Lincolnshire, be they people that were founders or innovators or people from the NHS. And we really talked about what innovation might look like for health and care. And the energy in that room and the drive to do something further coming out of that was really powerful and really inspiring. And I think the other thing that I heard in that conversation that really resonated me, perhaps as somebody who isn't from this area originally, is just that power of place and the power of the geography, and both the challenges that gives us. And Pat quite rightly referred to infrastructure, and I imagine many of us have traveled some distance to get here today, so the challenges of the road network are very familiar to us. But also the opportunities that come. And again, if I look at my own sector, one of the biggest opportunities from us actually comes from that challenge of rurality and understanding the place in which we operate. And so on that basis, I'm really delighted to introduce to you a great innovator in the health and care sector in Lincolnshire, who is going to lead us through our first conversation that we're having on our conference theme around innovation for growth. So this discussion is going to explore the power of innovation in successful and future sustainable economic growth across tech, AI, robotics, and digital platforms. And participants will be giving their insights into the world, their worlds really, through the groundbreaking innovations which are powering their sectors. Chairing this conversation is Benedict Heaver, and Benedict is a member of the Innovation Commission, and he is the Managing Director of Streets Heaver Healthcare Computing, which is a prominent supplier of software solutions for the healthcare market, and they achieved Certified B Corp accreditation in 2023. Benedict was recently named in the LDC Top 50 Ones to Watch, which highlights the most ambitious business leaders and was featured in the Times. And we're really lucky to have Benedict with us today, and Benedict is business based in Lincolnshire.
Thank you very much, Nikki, for that introduction. So I'm joined on stage by 4 people who have got some real experience and will give us a great insight into things that are going on in and around Lincoln and Lincolnshire. So firstly, thank you to the LEP for inviting me today. Just to add on to what Nikki said, I personally believe that Lincolnshire is a great place to do business, and one of the reasons for us being involved with the LEP and Business Lincolnshire is that we want to encourage people to come here and things. So things like the B Corp is really important to us, and I think actually Lincolnshire's got a real active role that it can play in sort of pushing forward sort of business for a purpose rather than just for profit. So without much further ado, I'd like to just go through the panel that we've got up here and ask them to give a brief introduction of who they are and what their business does. So Stuart, do you want to kick us off?
Yep, good morning, thank you, Ben. I'm Stuart Piccaver. I'm CEO of the Jetco Group. We have 4 facets to our business. We have field-scale horticulture, which is where we've come from. We have controlled environment horticulture, which mainly involves hydroponics. We've got 2-3 units running now. And we're also working on medicinal cannabis, mainly in trials at the moment. And we're also looking at waste valorization. That's us as a business, and today I'm focusing mainly on controlled environment horticulture because we have a major infrastructure project that we are developing.
Hi, I'm Steph Hamill, and I'm a Top 50 Women in Tech, UN delegate, and sometimes known as a gun for hire for a lot of businesses when they have challenges in my consultancy role. I have recently moved to the area, and I'm obsessed with Lincolnshire, particularly Grimsby, which might surprise you all. When I look around, all I see is opportunity, and I've met some incredible people since I got here. My role and what I do is I disrupt in a really positive, purposeful way. I've worked with businesses like the BBC, Capita, most recently Channel 4 just at the beginning of this week, and EY a couple of weeks ago. And I help them unlock opportunities for innovation and growth through leveraging their diverse workforces. So if anyone needs any help unlocking creativity within your business, that's what I do.
Fiona?
Yep, so hi everyone, I'm Fiona Strens. I too am relatively new to Lincolnshire and think it's got an awful lot going for it. I'm at the university and I run a centre focused on applying data and AI, mostly in the defence and national security sector, but I very much see the technology as having much wider applicability. I haven't been a lifelong academic. I actually started my career as a civil servant. I've worked in industry and I've also co-founded and led an AI-enabled analytics company. So I've seen the innovation challenge from a number of different directions, and I very much look forward to this conversation.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Brown. I'm the Head of Strategic Supplier Relationships for the STEP programme at UK Industrial Fusion Solutions. My role is very much about developing and implementing strategy for how we collaborate with industry to ensure that we get the best-in-class, real innovation into the programme for the long term, so talking kind of thinking ahead for the next 20 years.
Cool. So staying with you, Sarah, the theme of the conference today is about the emerging technologies that we can use to innovate and bring growth to Lincolnshire. So maybe you could just elaborate a little bit more on sort of what you see in that side?
Yeah, sure. So innovation is truly at the heart of STEP. So we're talking about first-of-a-kind technology, and we're talking about really capturing niche and specialist technologies out there to bring together and kind of integrate. To do that requires collaboration. I know that was a theme of the kind of chair talk as well. So what we're looking to do is how we collaborate with the local supply chain in particular, but also niche supply chains out there. We're looking at outreach in the local community. So as I'm sure you all know, we've chosen West Burton as the heart of the STEP programme, so that will be the home. And we're really looking to develop an innovation hub surrounding that, with a focus on fusion technology, of course, but also looking at kind of spin-offs that can come from that in the future, looking at some of the other technologies that we've patented along the way over the last 5 years, and how we can really drive that forward. We are taking a lot of thought around how we protect the technology from a national but also regional perspective to make sure that we really retain that world-leading first in the global race kind of opportunity. And the local area, as I said, will be at the heart of that. We are engaging with academia, and we're looking right down to kind of primary school level in terms of how we can really drive some of those STEM opportunities in as early as possible, so that we bring excellent capability through for future generations. And we are talking about kind of groundbreaking future energy opportunity here to really address the climate change challenge.
Amazing. Sounds like there's something really for the future there. So sort of pulling it back a little bit more to today, and Fiona, maybe you could talk about AI, because I think this has been previously spoken about in the sort of long-off vision, but as we've already heard today, you know, this is starting to come to fruition, and I believe there's a report out that sort of puts Lincoln and Lincolnshire in the top 10 of places to do AI.
Top 4, actually.
Top 4,
so
fantastic.
there you go, which is awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think data and AI as a sort of technology family, you know, there's nothing new, arguably, right? I wrote my first neural network algorithm when I started my career about 35 years ago. So they've been around for a while, and we've heard talk of evidence-based decision-making, data-driven decision-making, and people have been trying to adopt data into businesses for a very long time. But something really has changed. And I think it's that we've had a transformation in the effectiveness of some of these data and AI tools. In the level of adoption, both deliberate and not deliberate, and I'll say a little bit more about that, and essentially the whole pace that the development and adoption and use of these technologies and tools and indeed mindset is moving at. And I don't think we can talk about AI is coming anymore. I think AI is here. So I'm pretty sure that every one of you will have engaged in some way with AI this morning, whether you know it or not. It might have been, plotting your route to get here. It might have been ordering your Uber. It might have been scrolling the news this morning. It is here. And the consequences of that, I think, are that to lead and to win in a world where these tools are already here means that we have to get ahead of it. We have to be ambitious in terms of how we adopt these technologies. We've got to move on from a culture of maybe slight skepticism and fear to one where we're all a bit more open-minded about how we pull these. I say technologies, but a lot of this is actually about culture. Organizations need to have a data culture. Culture, as we know, is driven by leadership. So for me, a lot of this comes back to how we lead and how we put skills and support into our organizations to enable the safe, efficient, effective adoption of these kind of technologies. And at the university, we very much see our role as part of that, whether that's on the skills side, whether it's on the research and innovation side. And although I work for a university, I see my role as one of catalyzing collaboration to deliver benefit for us all.
Excellent. So I think you've mentioned there about the culture that a business would need within that, which probably takes us into your realm, Steph, of how can businesses out there sort of develop themselves so that they can really take these great opportunities that we're hearing about?
So I echo much of what Fiona's saying, and innovation isn't just an outcome, it's a culture. And there is much that we need to unlearn in businesses. So I was a management consultant, I apologize, and my role was to be efficient, to find cost savings, to get from A to B as quickly as possible. That goes directly against being truly innovative and coming up with insightful opportunities and transformations. And it's systemic. It's baked into everything we do, whether it's at school. We teach our kids to be worker bees. We don't teach them to be innovators. This is something that we need to unlearn. And it's also something that within our businesses, we do not give our businesses the space and the opportunity to think creatively, to break apart our platforms and processes. There's something that I've been doing. I've been working with startup and scale-up founders primarily for the past 3.5 years. And I've worked with over 300. And there's something that repeatedly comes up. Those intrapreneurial and entrepreneurial skills, they have to do those outside of their day jobs. Companies, corporates are not fostering this opportunity space to think creatively. We're so busy all the time. We're doing our jobs, we're fulfilling a role, we're being worker bees, we're being efficient. But the reality is, if we don't give ourselves space to think creatively, we are not going to innovate and it's not going to be part of our culture. Years ago, when I worked at a company called Turner Broadcasting, I had every head of Cartoon Network from around Europe at the head office in Soho. And I did something pretty radical. I didn't know how it was going to land. It was pretty disruptive. But I took a punt. And I had my son, my eldest son, I took him from school and 7 other friends. So 8 bosses from Cartoon Network, 8 kids. And instead of having a board meeting about Cartoon Network, we had a brainstorming workshopping session with kids. It was the first time these heads of the businesses had got out of their own heads and their own processes, and they'd actually had fun with kids, thinking about kids. 2 of the initiatives that were brought up in that meeting actually came to fruition through the business. And that was just by giving space for a culture of innovation. Now, I'm teaching on an MBA program, and I'm MBA faculty. I'm actually going to be affiliated with Nottingham, the University of Nottingham, shortly. But one of the things that we do is we encourage this MBA approach. Everyone has to set up their own business and be revenue generating by the end of the 18-month process. So many of them have taken those skills and applied them back to their businesses in an intrapreneurial way. So we talk about entrepreneurship, but actually within corporates and businesses, that culture, we need to allow people the space to be intrapreneurial.
I couldn't agree more. It's something that we take into our business. We give everyone 10% time for their own personal development. It doesn't have to be anything to do with the business. People who've listened to me talk about this before, one of the things I'll often quote is Galileo discovered the mountains on the moon. He had exactly the same equipment as everyone else, but it was his love of landscape painting that gave him the knowledge to do it. So it's creating these serendipity moments in businesses, I think, and to me as well, it goes beyond that. We talk a lot as well within the business about that right brain thinking. Actually, how do you bring creativity into something, that could actually be really heavily regulated and could look very science-based. And to me, that really connects people with creativity, which leads to joy, which leads to actually, business actually having a purpose. And I think that's really key to engaging with the young workforce as they come through. I think exactly what you're saying, we're seeing as people come into the business, we're having to almost de-educate them from this thing. We have a phrase within the business that we're going to stop doing stuff to people. They've got to be the masters of their own destiny. And if that means actually they go on to work outside of the business, if we've enabled them to do that, and we've had some real success stories with it. So we've got a young lady who started with us. She went through a couple of departments within the business, and she's gone on to take up her dream job and helping McLaren Automotive develop their latest car. And I just like to think we had a small part to play in that. So exactly what you're saying, I think you need to trust the people, you need to see what sort of serendipity you can do, and actually that brings sort of joy into the business, and we've just seen productivity and things like that go up. It's not without its challenges though, and I imagine, Stuart, you've probably got a similar sort of story within your business as well, and actually multi-generational. I'd be interested to understand how these things as well can sort of work, in more established businesses rather than just the startups.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating hearing the mindsets there, because one of the most common questions I'm asked whenever I speak to people about what we're up to, they say, how on earth did you get from where you were to where you've got to? Which is quite an interesting question. And I think it's a combination of a number of things. I think there's a mindset, and I don't know how much of that can be taught and how much can be learnt, but how much is innate. And I think a lot of it comes down to need. So, for example, when we look at the hydroponics, the fascinating thing about that was it was a conversation with a technologist from one of the retailers, and he basically said, we want lettuce in sandwiches without contaminants, please. And I said, well, there's only one way to do that. And he went to his supplier and said, this is what we need to do, please make it happen. And that was the catalyst. And interestingly enough, I mean, one of the things that's actually come about with the project that I'm going to talk about a bit more later on in this session is that it's been in the making for about 15 to 20 years, interestingly, but the technologies weren't there. So some of these innovations have to wait for things to catch up. And I think there's two facets to it within a business that's actually operating. And one is that we must be careful not to go too soon, because there's countless examples, I think, through industry where people have got great ideas and they've gone too soon and the market isn't ready. And we've certainly found that in certain instances. So we've had to sort of back off, and then suddenly everybody's really interested 4 years later in an idea that we'd already put forward. And the other one is the technologies. So interestingly enough, I mean, I think there's probably about 4 or 5 key technologies that have come on in the last 10 to 15 years that make the project we're looking at possible. And one of them is as straightforward as just LED lighting. At this latitude, to produce product for 12 months of the year, we need to have the energy in the product. And that technology has moved on at a huge pace in the last 10 to 15 years. One of them is the cost of renewable energy. So most of you will be used to paying, probably as businesses, I don't know what you'll be paying at the moment, probably about 20p net for your electricity, maybe 21, 22. If you've got renewables behind the meter, you can be accessing that power for 7 or 8 pence, which is actually key to making these projects viable. It's just not possible to buy it from the grid and make this viable. And the other is actually balancing that power. We heard in the previous talk that we've got an issue with energy constraints within Lincolnshire, and a lot of that's to do with the network. And interestingly enough, I mean, I think reinvesting in the network and making it fit for purpose to renewables would cost billions and billions and billions, and certainly more billions than the government's got. So we have to find solutions, certainly in the short to medium term and sometimes in the long term, to actually creating microgrids and mini-grids. And ours is a microgrid. So what we've essentially got is we're looking at producing on-farm hydrogen, which would then be our energy balancing, if you like. So that's just using what's obviously quite old technology. You've all done it in your chemistry at school, which is electrolyzer. And we'd be harvesting our own water. So essentially with the greenhouse, we'd be harvesting about 90,000 tonnes of water a year, and then utilising about 15,000 tonnes of that to produce hydrogen. But I'll come to that later.
And Sarah, you're working in an industry that's obviously at the sort of bleeding edge of what you're doing. It'd just be interesting to hear your sort of input on the sort of culture that you've got within there that sort of fosters all of that.
So I completely agree with everything that's been said, really. One of the things we try and focus on is giving people time to actually think innovatively. We have seen that play out over the last 5 years. So we have reviews quite frequently from an expert board that review the fusion technology that we're looking at. And actually that forces some of that behaviour in a way, because we have to pivot really quickly, and we have to be able to be agile and make really quick decisions about, which direction we go in. And I think that just drives that culture. It's very much built into our charter that we enforce across the whole programme, and our leadership really breathes and lives that charter, so that helps to flow down into the organisation. But I totally agree. I think it's a time thing, and it's really allowing people that opportunity to think. Again, the programme is extremely busy. We've progressed significantly over 5 years, but that only happens by allowing that opportunity for our people.
Brilliant. So I suppose if we sort of bring this conversation back to sort of impact it can make. So some of the stuff that's going on at the moment in terms of, the big questions around productivity, but also environmental subjects. How can we bring this innovation forward, and how can we have that sort of impact that everyone's expecting? What do we really need to do around that, Stuart?
Well, I mean, specifically from an environmental point of view, we're measuring where the carbon actually is used. So, I mean, we're in Lincolnshire, so I'm assuming there's some horticultural, agricultural businesses in the room. And the majority of what we use field scale is essentially on fuel or fertiliser. And then there's a whole discussion around what we're doing with soil at the moment, which is quite interesting depending on the soil type. When we're looking at horticulture, one of the big areas, interesting enough, is peat. So, and also energy use in terms of electricity. And so the key thing really is producing food with a very low carbon footprint, or a zero carbon footprint, or even a positive carbon footprint. requires a step change, hence why we're talking about innovation today. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking at just basics, a lorry or a tractor, electrification really isn't looking like it's going to work at the moment. The sort of power that you need to put through those sort of machines would take quite some charging, and we just haven't got the supply or the grid to do that. And great thing to do. So I was talking at JCB last year, and watching a hydrogen tractor working in their quarry, which was quite heartening. I'm really pleased to say, because obviously JCB did a lot of their own innovation, they talked about the fact they'd looked at 5 different fuels, and I was sort of quietly sitting there nervous that they were going to come up with something different to what we were working on, because I thought, well, that will be a bit of a dampener on my talk. But he said, yeah, we need hydrogen and we need it now, and please start producing it, and where can we get it from? So that was a refreshing sort of ask, if you like. It was one of those key drivers. So in terms of what we're doing, there is the possibility, but it requires a step change, it requires policy change, and it requires a drive from government itself, because it's a bit like the mobile phone network. It's a bit chicken and egg. If you want to convert to hydrogen, you need to have supply, you need to have a network, you need to have all the things that go with it. But to do that, there's got to be impetus at the start to get it going. Right.
And Fiona, if I come to you on that, what is there out there, or what do you see sort of emerging from the whether it's the data-driven side or the AI that sort of can really sort of enable people in this room to sort of be able to pinpoint what the next thing is that they can really start going to have a look at to sort of make some great leaps that we need in this sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think data and AI journey is one of maturity, sort of based adoption, right? So if I use an example that's close to my heart, which is a vision we have to make Lincoln a sort of center of excellence for the application of these types of technologies in helping people to make better decisions. So, we can either all go off and think about that in the context of our own individual enterprises, and, we can have an academic piece and an industrial piece, and, government could be talking about it but struggling to do it because they live in fear of it, or we can get together and do it. And I think we've got some real opportunities, and it does play also to the productivity and sort of environmental agendas here. If we do stuff together, we leverage the best of what everyone's got around. I think the importance of place came up earlier. I think place is really important, and Lincolnshire's both big enough and small enough to do place really, really well, but also theme-based collaboration. And it's not just about saying we're going to do something, it's about thinking about how we actually do it very, very differently. So maybe we leave our corporate badges at the door when we enter into new collaborations and collaboration environments. And to the points made earlier, we need to empower people to have freedom to think and to act. But I very much see that as something that we should be doing together rather than separately. And underpinning that is all the enablers. So in terms of what this community and the LEP can be doing, I think enablers is a key word, collaboration is a key word, and we've already talked about skills underpinning all of that as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because some of the stuff that we see, I think you can get sort of caught up in the hype, especially around AI, and actually the areas that we've seen it in healthcare are basically taking the donkey work off the clinicians to actually enable them to do what they're trained to do and actually spend more and more time with the patient. We saw a great thing. We work a lot in ophthalmology, and we've got a patient portal onto our product. And so the patient can log on there and they can interact with their record. They can do assessments now remotely without having to come in. Brilliant, but it's not very good if you've got cataracts. So we've actually got a client who's put an AI layer over that, which is actually communicating via telephony with these people, a lot of elderly people who have got cataracts. And it becomes an enabler really for sort of actually spreading adoption of technology. It sort of breaks that barrier and becomes, that diversity inclusion piece as well, which I think is something that we should really look into. And it isn't all the big fancy stuff that the likes of Amazon and Google are doing. I think there's lots of really low-hanging fruit that people should look at. So I don't know, Steph, have you seen anything similar to that as well out there?
I was going to ask to jump in on the conversation if you hadn't asked me. So a few years ago, I was lucky enough to co-chair the Future of Work event for Wired magazine with editor Greg. And it was an event with lots of futurists and people who are super involved in the future of tech. And we were focusing on AI as a conversation point. There's a misconception that AI is this panacea, and it really isn't. There are lots of other forms of technology that are going to help and support us in our transformation and our growth. AI, or ML, as it is most of the time, it's an augmentation tool. By combining our very human skills and being more human-centered, automation and other technologies free us up to get back to being human, to do what we do best. And I can't remember the name. Guys, does anyone know the name of the chess AI? Does anyone remember the name of it?
Well, there's lots of examples, but like...
The really famous one. Anyway, it's just the name. They ran a very strategic test on the AI versus the AI versus human, and then combined teams of AI plus human versus just AI, and every single time, no matter how they ran those tests, it was the augmented team of AI plus human that smashed it. And I think this is where this conversation needs to go. It's not about tools and technology replacing us or watch out for the robots. It's about how we start leveraging it to get back to being more human.
Couldn't agree more. I think one of the bits that's often missed is humans aren't actually that logical, you know, and I think that's where the technology often falls down. Just move into Slido and some of the questions on there. So I'll pass this over to the panel. The number one question is, what's the biggest obstacles to innovation that you foresee in the next decade? Sarah, do you want to start? Sorry.
So from experience of the STEP programme, I think there is an element of that when there's a risk associated with the unknown. There's a massive dilemma in terms of how you bring everyone on that journey with you. If we don't find a better way to bring new ideas and new technologies into the world and reduce that kind of initial fear reaction, we're going to see a slow kind of halt in some of that implementation. And also funding. I think there's lots of SMEs out there with some excellent, innovative ideas, but they're not necessarily business experts, you know, they're technology experts, and they don't necessarily have the same skill sets. So I think we really need to think about collaboration and across kind of government, industry and academia in terms of how we support that and really drive some of those expertise into industry to enable that. And to kind of provide some different funding opportunities. So, you know, we think about grants and the like. They're not always the most accessible investment opportunities. And I think if you're heavily reliant on government, that only takes you so far. So one of the things we find is we're already considering about how later down the line we look at other investment sources so that we can operate more at pace. When you're in government spending cycles, for example, that naturally creates a delay, potentially.
Fiona?
Yeah, I mean, I'll build on that. I think I think the lack of enablers is where I'll go on this, and in particular the lack of enablers at the right point in time and with availability to the right people. So, we need to be ahead. This is a very fast-moving world, it's a very volatile world, and the development of some of these opportunities is moving at such a pace that it's very easy to be behind the curve. So things in a community like this that I think we need to be thinking about are, places where people can get together and collaborate to innovate, skills, and I'll go back to leadership skills as well, not just practitioner skills. And then in some of the sectors I operate in, like defense and security, there's some very specific challenges around doing business with those kind of environments. And the regions that invest in the enablers around things like security and helping SMEs to access a difficult market will be the ones that will win in the end.
Cool. Steph?
Oh, crikey. I'm really proud of being British, and it kind of feels like a funny thing to say at the moment. We're kind of told, oh, you can't say that, you need to be a bit embarrassed. And one of the things that I have discovered, I've lived in Berlin, I've lived in Los Angeles, and actually only when I got to Lincolnshire did I realise just how much of a London bubble there is. And I think a lot of people here will realise that and be very aware of it. There's also some other issues that we have on a much larger scale, on a national scale, and it's infrastructure. If you look at our European comparatives, travel, for example, in France, they put in, I think, 120 train stations to cities that have got less than 100,000 people in the past kind of 10, 15 years. We've been doing the opposite. We don't think like a growth nation at the moment. We're not, there are a lot of very innovative, entrepreneurial British business people who are kind of being held back from being brilliant. And since I've got to Lincolnshire, it's everywhere. Lincolnshire is full of people who think like that and are challenging the status quo. But I think that we need to temper it with the human-centered approach and helping our workforces and our people be brilliant and unlocking opportunities for them to really excel and develop and innovate and transform. But also I think we need to be really mindful that and Stuart, you mentioned this before, for example, the grid and being able to leverage things. If it's not going to be done for us, we're going to have to do things ourselves. And that might mean devolution, it might mean miniature infrastructure. But I think that actually if we can get together, put our heads together and start thinking as a community, it could make Lincolnshire a real driver of growth for the entire country and change a lot of things.
Stuart?
Yeah, no, I'm really pleased you brought that up because we've had fantastic support locally. Brilliant from the LEP, from the local authority. They all really want us to innovate, really want us to get there. They understand that if we don't do it, that technology will basically be employed in Holland, Belgium, and it will just be overseas. It's not that far to get across to Harwich, and it's not that far to get across to the UK. And they want that innovation for the UK. What we're doing now is groundbreaking. I'm proud to be British, hence why I mentioned JCB. They're one of my sort of heroes. We're now doing things in our R&D where we're actually teaching the Dutch, which is great. We've developed basically horticulture without peat. We've identified new float technologies. We've worked out how to use the LEDs better. And we've done that all off our own back. And we've also supported companies like Concert Bio in London who are doing work on water technologies. And we are collaborating. But yes, I think the key thing is the enablers. And what I'd really like to see is I'd like to see some consistency in policy at a national level so that we can get some real drivers here. Because the money is there. We've had these basically. There's been a lot of publicity this week around what money's going to sort of horticulture and agriculture, and it's just how that money is spent. That's the key for me, and I think that's where we need to change it. So, for example, last year I think DEFRA gave 100 million back to Treasury, and that's just criminal. We're sitting here trying to develop a project, and we just can't get money because the way the money is targeted is too specific. we need enablers. We need somebody with a practical knowledge of how to get these projects off the ground.
Yeah, I think my thing to sort of pull it all together would be, it's been mentioned before, but also that culture that, you know, if people don't take anything more away from this, actually building that culture into your business, because we're talking today about AI, we could be up here next year talking about quantum. You know, there are things that are coming that we probably, you know, don't even know about yet. So actually, you know, I think one of the things that Lincolnshire's got is got really resilient businesses. And I think actually building that curiosity and that innovation into your business to be able to take advantage of all of these things that are coming down the track and to be able to get a lead with that rather than being disrupted by it is something that it's got. And, you know, one of the things that really differentiates Lincoln and Lincolnshire for me from a lot of the work I do when I'm down in London is I think all the businesses that I come across in Lincolnshire share generously, and they're open and they're transparent, and the collaboration that goes on in this county, even if there aren't, you know, seemingly much in common between the businesses. I think they're very open to be able to share best practice and things like that. So, you know, take advantage of the people that are sat next to you, because they might be able to open it up for you. And also the facilities that we've got with the LEP and Business Lincolnshire have really enabled my business, certainly. And I don't think, like you say, until you get out of Lincolnshire, you realise actually how useful all of that is. Anyway, so I think that brings to conclusion the panel session. So if I could just ask everyone to show their appreciation for the panel, please.
That was absolutely fascinating. I'm really keen to hear more.
What a fantastic conversation. What a great group of people to have on the stage today. I love the fact that we're here talking about technology and AI and things, but actually the biggest takeaway from me from that conversation was about culture and the importance of people at the heart of what we do. And I love any conversation that involves bringing your kids to work, and Galileo as a landscape painter, and the fact that both of those came through are things that I'll be taking away from today.